All right. Hey, everybody. Teresa and I are so excited to be speaking to you all today. My name is Jamie Rachi, and I am super passionate about speaking to college-age women, specifically about their fertility and all the things they never learned, they never knew about their inner functionings. Because as you listen to Teresa and I, your eyes will be opened. There's likely things that you've heard before, which is why you're even here listening to Teresa and I, but I have a feeling that your mind will be completely blown. And the reason for that is because my mind is always blown every time I ask Teresa a question, or every time I do research, or anytime I dig in a bit more of just about how God created our beautiful bodies. My mind continues to be blown. So I just know you guys will just leave this session and just be inspired and excited and just awakened within. So yes, I'm from Cedar Falls, Iowa, 3 kids, the 4th on the way, and I'm a fertility care practitioner. I'm also the founder and former director of Guiding Star Cedar Valley. I don't know if you guys have heard, maybe raise a hand if you've heard of the Guiding Star Project. Oh, good. So some of you guys have heard of it. Good. So if you have not heard of it, I urge you to look up theguidingstarproject.com, especially if after this talk, your heart is like burning. When you look into this organization, it's a nonprofit that opens women's healthcare centers across the nation. I just have a feeling that you're going to be even more excited. I'm the former director, founder of Guiding Star Cedar Valley. My husband and I have an organization, a business. Maybe someday we'll have a building, but our business is called Fiat Living. And then Teresa and I started our podcast this past August. So however many months in the making. So that's a little bit about me. Again, I'm very excited to be speaking with you all. And I live and die by the mantra of, we cast a stone. Mother Teresa talks about casting a stone and then the ripple effect that comes from the tiniest little pebble. And so I'm hoping that this will be the little tiny pebble that creates ripples that then you guys can share this information with those you know. So with that, Teresa, do you want to share a little bit more about you and introduce yourself a bit more?
Yeah, so I'm going to move. This is going to be fun. Let's see if you can still see me. And if you can't, Jamie, you just might not be able to see me then for a little bit. But...
That's cool. If I don't talk for a bit, just give me like a thumbs up or like.
Oh yeah, see, this is my thumb. See my thumb?
I see it.
Do you want to tilt the screen down just a little bit?
Oh no, it's totally fine.
Okay.
It's totally fine. Okay. Oh, it's so great to see you guys. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, look at you. Okay, so some of you may know me. I mean, I am here in Omaha, and I'm a women's health nurse practitioner. And I used to be super close because Pope Paul VI, Jamie, if you don't know, to this Newman Center literally is like a 3-block radius. Away. So Pope Paul VI is super close to the Newman Center here, but I just stopped working at Pope Paul VI, and now I'm working full-time, fully at Sancta Familia Medical. So big transition in my life in the last week or so is leaving Pope Paul VI, but I'm doing the same thing. I am still doing women's health, and I'm super passionate about it. And a lot of you may know through the podcast that we're really about empowering women with knowledge about their bodies, but so many young women end up going to doctors where they're trying to figure out what's wrong with them, like PCOS and PMS and painful periods and acne and all this other stuff. And we know that traditional doctors don't have much to offer outside of birth control. So what we're doing is we're trying to inspire women to know that, one, there is alternatives, but two, that we can't really change the culture that we live in without people demanding something different. And so if we as women are not educated about how our bodies work, like, we don't have any ability to advocate for ourselves. You can't go to a doctor and be like, well, I want something different, if we don't know anything about how this all works, right? However, if you go in there and you are empowered and you are knowledgeable about how your cycle works, then they're going to be like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Because this lady knows actually more than I do. And I went to medical school. So, it's so cool when we know we have the power as women. And this is true feminism. This is authentic feminism, that we as women have the power to declare that really what we want is something good for our bodies, and that our bodies were not created bad to begin with, right? And that we can live in our hormones, and we become then the genius of our own bodies and our own hormones through education. So it's that simple. And, Jamie and I, just so you know how the podcast got started, honestly, it was like total Holy Spirit. Jamie and I met at a conference in February of last year or 2 years ago. Last year?
Last year, I think. It was pre-COVID, like right before.
Yeah, and we just sat together. We just happened to get placed together at a dinner table, and I was really hearing my own voice through Jamie, and actually like just meeting so many people now through the podcast. You realize, gosh, even in some ways that's not unique because so many people are passionate about this. This is truth, the truth that speaks to us all. But Jamie and I were sitting together, and I felt a connection, and I had been thinking about, how can I get my voice out more? I mean, I'm public speaking for the last 20 years. You get better at it over time, and you realize, okay, you have something to share, but how can I get it out to more people? And obviously this is like podcast time. Everybody listens to podcasts. I'm like, maybe I could do that. But I'm like, I can't do it by myself. Like, definitely can't do it by myself. I need a partner in crime. And Jamie and I were great together because we're kind of like a married couple in the sense that, yeah, I mean, I'm the dry, sarcastic introvert, and Jamie's the bubbly, energetic extrovert, and in a marriage, actually, if you don't know this, most people marry their opposite temperament. So a lot of times introverts and extroverts work really to get good together. So Jamie was perfect. And it was really just truly the Holy Spirit, because she has gifts and talents that I don't have that made this podcast possible. And so I'm just really grateful that she said yes to my just out of the whim, out of a whim, just being like, hey, you want to do a podcast with me? It's been really awesome. And now, like, again, we're reaching so many people across the nation. How awesome is that? So, yeah.
It's so cool. Teresa, I want to add to that just one little bit, but you guys, I felt a burning in my heart over the last couple of years, but I really felt God calling me out of that directorship job with Guiding Star to be a voice. I kept thinking and feeling and believing and hearing and almost like I'm to be a voice, I'm to be a voice, I'm to be a voice. So I felt so convicted to step out of that job to be a speaker. And so I have like a speaker package, and I created the whole thing, and I'm like, okay, this is it. This is going to be part of my business. And then COVID happened. But then I got an email from Teresa, like almost a perfect stranger that we sat, and again, there was that connection. So it's so cool. If you guys have this inner desire in your heart, and like there's a curveball, because I thought, Lord, oh no, like I wanted to be a speaker. I have this business model, and COVID hit, and like nobody's going anywhere. So, oh shoot, God still wants us all to be a voice. And so it's just beautiful how like amidst COVID that, God gave it a pivot plan. And so I knew immediately when I got that email from Teresa, as like random as it was so perfect. And so anyway, if any of you guys have a deep desire in your heart, it's kind of like a little side note. But like, don't ignore it. And it always will come up for you. It won't leave you. Because I know you guys are in college, and that discernment is so important. So yeah, Teresa, I love the way you described that relationship. And it's been fun too, because we've been getting to know each other through each episode. And that was one of the fun things we thought would be really cool, is that as we're shooting these episodes, we don't really know much about, well, now we do, but like at the beginning, there's like these two people we really don't know much, so we have to learn to work together, which we do very well. But then even again throughout each episode, it's like a surprise every time you learn something about each other. So it's been fun. It's been really fun.
Totally. Okay, so I know girls, you guys have a lot of questions, so I'm just going to ask, in terms of how you would like us to approach this, because Jamie and I, we can do it one of two ways. We can kind of give you an overview, you could say, of like the cycle, and just kind of like do the dynamic changes of the cycle if you want. But maybe the majority of you actually feel like you already know that pretty well, and you would just love to just dig into like the questions that you have. So I guess I'm going to do a show of hands. How many would like an overview of the cycle? How many would like to just dig into questions and answers? Sweet. That was Jamie sweet too.
That's awesome.
Okay, so I guess who wants to start then? Who's the brave one? He's got the first burning question.
I have a question.
Okay, so I think it was on the episode with Leah Jacobson, if that's correct. But you guys talk about like holistic feminism. And I know in today's like political climate, when I say to somebody that I'm a feminist, it can be kind of skewed. So what's your guys' approach to having those conversations about being a holistic feminist?
That is an awesome question. Jamie, I feel like you should go for it.
Okay. I love that question. I'm so glad you asked it. Feminism is such like a trigger buzzword. And so in terms of feminism, it's key. Well, two things. One, I was just talking about this with Leah yesterday about how we have to take that word back, about how there are so many words, their definitions change just because we want them to change, but how do we stay steady in any word? So first off, feminism in and of itself means that there's, not an equality in terms of holistic feminism, but a complementarity. So Pope John Paul II, he talks about new feminism. He calls for it. And so this is kind of Leah's assignment, I believe, on Earth, is to cast this vision of what new feminism is. And so because feminism is such a buzz trigger word, it almost suits the movement of Guiding Star most, because it's meeting people who crave to understand their body, and it resets feminism into femininity. And so it's kind of like I don't want to say it's an evangelism tool, but it's just a way to cast a net to attract people that need to hear this message. So like for you guys, so you maybe grew up in a household where this, natural family planning, fertility awareness, all that maybe was common, or maybe not. But at this point in your life, you're here and you're listening to Teresa and I because you have that interest and that conviction. Not everybody has that conviction. And so there is something beautiful about kind of redefining that feminism word. And so holistic is the key. So holistic is spelled with a W. So holistic's body, mind, spirit. It's not just a part of us. Like it's not just one part of us that makes us feminine. It's many parts of us that make us feminine. So that's the key. And actually Leah has a book coming out called Holistic Feminism. And I encourage you all to read it and to buy it, because she goes through the history of what feminism was meant to be and what it became. And there's different waves of feminism. So anyway, it is tricky, but it opens up a conversation. And so if somebody is like, oh, feminist, we can say, well, we're taking back that word. Feminist does not mean that we're competing with men. It doesn't mean that we're better than men. It means that we can be a complement to one another. Teresa, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Just, I think it's important to make sure when you meet someone where they're at to listen to them, because the fact is that there has been a history of harm towards women, and that there has been inequality throughout the years. So when we say a new feminism, it's not, I think what people kind of be like, oh, you're just discounting the fact that all of these bad things have happened to women. And the fact is they have happened to women, and we need to acknowledge that. So listening to people, and when they say, I'm a feminist because I don't think women should be paid less than men when they do the same job. Oh, absolutely. You know what I mean? Like finding the places where you agree with someone. And then, if it gets to the point where it's kind of like, well, I think feminism is a woman who can choose whatever she can do with her body. Okay, well, let's talk about that a little bit more. Because if you're looking at it from a holistic way, then I, as a woman, really think, again, like my body shouldn't be suppressed. So I think it's really harmful when women are told they have to put these chemicals in their body or have to put a foreign device in their body in order to control it, because I think that's not feminism. So you can kind of like, again, meet people where they're at and make agreements where women have been hurt. And it's interesting to just even like think about the book Subverted. It's a great read. It was written by Ellen Browder. To even look historically at how feminism has changed, because again, in the beginning of feminism or the feminist movement, women wanted, equality. They wanted to be treated right. They wanted voting rights. There was all these really good things. And in that book Subverted, how she talks how through her job, and she worked for Cosmo magazine, she could see that things were getting kind of like inserted into the feminist movement by men. And birth control and abortion were two things that were kind of inserted. Well, think about like who gets the benefit of women being suppressed in that way. If we control women's fertility, who benefits from that? Well, I mean, to some degree, I mean, women may, right? Maybe they can climb the ladder and stuff like that, but men also benefit from it. And, then what breaks down? What breaks down is the family. What breaks down is that relationships do not stay together when a man is not united to a woman, because the woman, when what keeps families together are children, right? So if I can control a woman's fertility, I don't have any reason to stay with her. And this is what we see now in this cohabitation world, you guys. It's sneaky, but the way we are designed in natural law and truth is that bonding between a man and a woman and a man is because they can have a child together. That's what keeps them united together. If that goes away, a man doesn't see the need to really stay with that particular woman. I mean, this goes back to just tribal stuff. So to the benefit of women, it's not good to take away something that's innate to who we are, which is the gift of our ability to create life.
Yeah. And the very thing that makes us who we are in terms of just the essence of us, our hormones play a very, very huge part of that into our femininity. And it gives us these superpowers, based on where we're at in the cycle. But if we're covering up those superpowers with suppressive birth control and synthetic hormones, then the true essence of who we are even individually can't shine. So you think about women in community, and you think about a chemical equation when you have several women together in community living within the essence of who they are. And if one person is altered, then a community of women are altered. We're not able to be as empathetic. We don't speak as many words. Literally, there's all the science around how suppressive medications and birth control, as it suppresses our hormones, do affect not only like our ability to connect with others, like our ability to sniff out the right mate, but also our brain and our long-term health and our short-term health. So it's very interesting, and like Teresa said, very tricky and weird and sneaky that by doing that, we call that feminism. How is that the case? So, I think holistic feminism is this concept. We're going to bring that word back, but we're going to give direction to what we mean by it by putting holistic at the front and putting a W at the beginning of holistic instead of the H that it normally is spelled with. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
So I actually watched a talk by Dr. Janet Smith today. I don't know who that is, on just like contraception and everything. But she made this one comment how like we as women, like with our hormones, we're different every single day of the month. And like how with men, like you look at their hormone line and it's like the same.
Mm-hmm.
Like yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Like that's how she put it. But how like we obviously live in community here with like guys, and I have a lot of brothers, and I'm just wondering like how to not awkwardly kind of like share that, because there's a lot of differences throughout the month, like just on different days. And I don't know if that like makes any sense, but just like different tips on like we fluctuate a lot, and how to not control that because we don't want to suppress it, but how to like share that in a good way, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. How to, not freak your brothers out or your dad by talking about periods and mucus. And I totally get it, because I have 6 sons. So I'm always talking about this stuff, and sometimes they just hide. So I guess that's, they really don't want to talk about it, they just hide from me. But there is a way I think you can talk about it. You don't have to be like, I guess, graphic or so detailed, but I think it's unique. You might be having a bad day. Let's say it's the few days before your period, and you're just emotional. Maybe you're sitting with someone of the opposite sex, and you're watching a TV commercial or a movie together, and you're bawling. And the person's looking at you like, or the guy is like, what is wrong with her? Because like that wasn't even sad at all. But she's just like losing it, it's an appropriate time to bring it up. Well, gosh, I mean, women are just different than guys, aren't they? And it happens to be, you know, a few days before that thing that comes every month for women. And like my hormones, I think, are really different today. And so this is why I'm having this experience. And okay, if you're a guy and you're interested in women, and most guys are interested in women, you might want to know more. See, I think ultimately when you get to the point where boys move past high school, they're actually really interested in this stuff. They may not say it or know how to say it, but they actually are. Ultimately, men want to, you know, be with a woman someday, have a woman love him, and so they're interested in us. And so you can have these conversations. I think if you're confident, again, in knowing your body and knowing these changes, then it just kind of can become natural, those conversations. And for me and my own sons, again, I'm not afraid to talk about it. It's probably because I talk about it every day of my life, but I try not to scare them. I just try to, you know, bring it up in a natural way. When we talk about like a pregnant woman, like Jamie is right now, that's so cool. Like, did you know, like, just fun facts, like a woman's uterus like grows, what did I say in the last episode, like 100 times, like, you know, from the size it is, and just all these cool like scientific facts about the human body. There's just ways I think that you can insert that in a not awkward way.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And what's interesting too is how, you know, with Dr. Janet Smith, the comparison that she's giving with the hormones, but something I learned about male hormones is actually they do fluctuate, but they fluctuate within the 24-hour time period. So like every time a man walks past truly, they've done all these studies. This is your brain on birth control. I am not philosophically aligned with the woman, but she does a lot of great research. It's the name of the book. Anyway, it talks about how every time a man walks past a gun shop, like hunting, his testosterone goes ring. Or anytime you see he's around a woman, you know, who might be ovulating, his testosterone increases. Anytime he's watching sports or some fighting, his testosterone increases. So it's like, it's a situational, it's circumstantial. So they actually fluctuate. If someone's like, oh, you're just being hormonal, and you're like, well, so are you, because it's true. Whereas we can anticipate somewhat, at least, you know, if they're like, oh, you're so hard to manage, like, you're actually more hard to manage because yours is more circumstantial, and I can pretty much guarantee how I'm going to be feeling throughout the course of the month. So it's just it's very interesting how God made us. But that was a great question. I'm glad you asked it. And I think charting your cycle, if you are like your boyfriend or your brothers or whatever, and I don't know if brothers are, they're probably not going to want to look at your cycle, but like maybe a dad, I mean, you know, depending on being able to communicate, like, Dad, look at my cycle. Stop asking me questions. I'm emotional because I'm getting my period soon. But I know like with boyfriends and then husbands, they just get to know your rhythm, you know, and they kind of just know how to react to that. And that's okay. And it's very empowering for a relationship too.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, we've talked about this before, Jamie. I mean, just knowing that men are responsive that way, like their hormones like are, it's such a great way. I've never really thought of it that way, Jamie. But I mean, if you're with a guy and again, you really like the guy, or if you're dating the guy, that you have in some ways like a responsibility to know that, you know, that men kind of react more in their hormones. And, you know, we have to like respect that. And men need to respect women. And you also need to know that men will be more attracted to you. Your boyfriend will when you're ovulating in a super powerful way. Like in a such a powerful way that, you know, many times when a couple has, you know, intercourse for the very first time, they actually get pregnant because it was the time that pushed them over the edge. God wants babies on this earth. So this chemical attraction, this hormonal thing that happens, and any person who's married and who lives in their natural hormones know this. But if you didn't know it and you're just going along and just, you know, living your life with your boyfriend trying to be chaste, and you didn't know that, I just think it's such a powerful tool to know, like, I shouldn't be alone with my boyfriend in a basement watching a movie at night when I'm ovulating, you know, because like that's going to be a time where it's just going to be totally hard for you as human beings to just not do this thing that God has created us to do, to create babies on this world.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. Is the testosterone thing with ovulation with every girl, or is it like specifically like, oh, he's attracted to me because he's my boyfriend? Like, is it that, or is it like every girl?
No, it's every girl. I mean, they've done studies with, I mean, it's weird, you guys, but like they've done studies with strippers, for example, and they will show that a woman who is ovulating makes 60% more tips when she's ovulating versus when she's not. And I'm just telling you, the longer you live as a woman, I think you recognize this too when you're in tune to your body and your cycles, is that, I don't know, I just think you notice that people become attracted. And I don't even think it's not even always a male female thing. It's an attraction thing. Like when our estrogen levels are high, we're confident, our hair is beautiful, our skin is beautiful, our words are better equipped. So not only will men be attracted to you, but everyone will. So it's just this powerful thing that we have. And I think, again, when we talk about our hormone superpowers, we're saying you can leverage that to help you in your life as a woman, but we also then need to respect its power too, and what its abilities are. But yes, it could be any man.
And I would have that conversation, like let your boyfriend know, be like, okay, so here's the thing. That's what I learned too. And, you know, in terms of suppressing that hormonal fluctuation with, you know, artificial means, synthetic birth control, that kind of thing, if you're not experiencing those fluctuations, not only are you not experiencing the essence of yourself in terms of, you know, you're likely more dull, you don't speak as clearly in those things, more tired, you don't absorb vitamins as much when you're on birth control. But but in terms of your relationship, they found that between the 60s and the 70s, you know, the divorce rate skyrocketed after birth control came out. And the theory is that it is because it's much easier, like Teresa started off with the talks, being able to be in a relationship without the quote unquote consequence of a child. But also, if I'm a man and my wife is on birth control, but the secretary in the office is not on birth control, and she's ovulating, but I'm married to a woman who's not, you know, you can imagine, even though obviously it's not great, but if that moral compass is not ingrained in that man, how his physiological reaction may think he's in love with her, you know, during this time, and she'll have that attraction to him and vice versa. So birth control does us no favors, you know, in terms of just the biology. It's, you know, it's how we populate the earth. We need to have that, it's somewhat of that attraction. And so that's what I found so interesting too. And again, it's a correlation of divorce and birth control, but I think it's a very strong one, specifically between a time of 10 years that it rose that high and that quick. Okay.
That's a good question. Yeah.
Hey, this is like a question about this ovulation and stuff. Simple, but why does it sometimes hurt? Like around that time.
The question was, why does ovulation hurt, Jamie? Sometimes. Yeah. So often referred to as Mittelschmerz. I didn't know that. Mittelschmerz is the term for ovulation pain. Probably because some guy figured out what that pain was and got his named after it. That's typically what happens in medical stuff. Well, it's interesting because if you think about it, the process of ovulation is actually very inflammatory. In fact, when we talk about what happens on the ovary after that egg is released, we often refer to the place where the egg came out as the stigmata. So it just gives you kind of more of a metaphorical vision of that. But you get this cyst. So, you know, sometimes people will have an ultrasound done and they'll be like, well, I was told I had an ovarian cyst. And I'm always careful to, you know, help women understand that, because you make a cyst every month of every menstrual cycle. And that cyst actually grows to be about 2.2 up to even 2.5 centimeters. So, I mean, it's not small. And it's sitting on this ovary and it's going to release this egg. And when it does, it's a rupturing. Like, we don't use a soft word for it. It's a rupturing out of this egg in your body so that the fallopian tube can kind of come on top of that and grab it so it goes down there to meet with potential sperm. But that process is inflammatory. Now, most of the time, the body is got all sorts of things going on in terms of chemicals and immune system reactions and hormone reactions to kind of quell that, you could say, and have the body work in harmony so that it doesn't hurt. But because there are inflammatory chemicals being produced at that time, some women will feel that, you know, process of ovulation. And usually when you do, when it's normal, I would say, it happens over about 30 minutes to a few hours at the most. and you just might feel kind of like crampy either on one side or maybe even mid, just kind of some dull menstrual cramping. And if you were to take a couple ibuprofen, it'd probably be fine. Now, there are situations where people have severe kind of ovulation pain, and that can last for many hours and actually, would put someone in bed, let's say, kind of like bad menstrual cramps would. And that isn't normal. And sometimes when that's happening, and especially if it goes with painful menstrual periods as well, or irregular cycles, or pain at other times of the month, or even bowel pain, then that can be a sign of endometriosis. But there is a typical or normal type of ovulation pain, and that's what I described.
Is it more normal to have like that pain, like you said, it could be on like one side or the middle? Like pretty much for me, it's always on like the same side. Does that mean, like obviously we have like multiple ovaries, does it mean maybe one side is more inflamed than the other?
I mean, it's possible, like sometimes when we're trying to discern whether someone has endometriosis, if they're always having pain on one side. And again, if the pain is affecting their function in any way or their quality of life because it's so significant, then we would wonder like, yeah, is there something going on that side of the body or that ovary? And we're usually thinking about endometriosis. But let's just say you happen to kind of have pain on that one side, but it's not every month. It might just be that every once in a while on that particular ovary, you just tend to feel ovulation. And that may just be normal.